I'm sorry, Paul. This is all wrong.
What?
You'll have to do it over again. It's not worthy of you. Throw it all out. Except for that part of naming the gravedigger after me. You can leave that in.
I really value your criticism, but maybe we're being a little hasty here.
Paul, what you've written just isn't fair.
Not fair.
That's right. When I was growing up in Bakersfield, my favorite thing in all the world was to go to the movies on Saturday afternoons for the chapter plays.
Cliffhangers.
I know that, Mr. Man. They also call them serials. I'm not stupid, you know. Anyway, my favorite was Rocket Man. And once it was a no-brakes chapter. And the bad guys stuck him in a car on a mountain road and knocked him out and welded the doors shut and tore out the brakes and started him to his death. And he woke up and tried to steer and tried to get out, but the car went off a cliff before he could escape. And it crashed and burned, and I was so upset and excited. And the next week, you better believe I was first in line. And they always start with the end of the last week. And there was Rocket Man trying to get out. And here comes the cliff. And just before the car went off the cliff, he jumped free. And all the kids cheered. But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car!"
Oscar Wilde once wrote, "Each man kills the thing he loves. The coward does it with a kiss. The brave man does it with a sword." In this episode of Right Good, we're going to talk about the ultimate kiss of death for any creative medium, fandom. With me today is Tim Heiderich, author of Misunderstanding Comics and co-host of Have You Seen This?, a podcast about obscure and misbegotten visual media. Hi, Tim. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what fandom means to you.
Hi, it's great to be here. I am one half of Have You Seen This? And yeah, we like to dig up some gems of sort of unusual and overlooked media and movies and help kind of bring them to a new audience. But yeah, I have been a fan of various genre television and, books and games and all sorts of stuff for years and years. So I've kind of been in and out of fandom in various forms. And I think I have over the years gained some perspective on when fandom can kind of turn toxic versus being like a healthy social outlet. So yeah, I'm more than happy to hold forth on that topic.
Well, before we get into it, why don't we start off by defining fandom? Now, I'll start by saying that we're not contrarian jerks. We're not saying that you're bad for enjoying stuff. Liking things is good and normal. As the meme goes, we will let people enjoy things. But that's not what we mean by fandom. So what's the difference between liking a thing a lot and being in a fandom? So the example, or the way I'd define it, I guess, is making your engagement with a certain form of media a main part of your identity, or a major part of your identity. Defining yourself by the media you consume or enjoy. For example, watching and enjoying Doctor Who is all right, but when you start calling yourself a Whovian, that means you're participating in fandom. Now, Tim, I picked you for this episode because you mentioned that you were super involved in fandom back in the day, and then you sort of had a come-to-Jesus moment. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, bring it back to Misunderstanding Comics. That whole book is, it's a parody of Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, and it's sort of a satire of fandom, and, in particular, my troubled relationship with it. But in it, my artist and I cover how fandom is a way for marginalized people to find a community, but it can turn really insular and kind of, I want to say, it can kind of curdle into a sort of into obsession and divisiveness, and I think that's really missing the true spirit of it. The come to Jesus moment that you mentioned, I brought up in the episode you're on of Have You Seen This?, which is my familiarity with the movie adaptation of the book Ready Player One, which I had not read. Yeah, but it's the guys who do Mystery Science Theater and Riff Tracks. They did a spin-off podcast where they just lambasted that book, and
Right.
I'd mainlined it, and partway through it, because they make a lot of hay out of how the book is basically like weaponized nostalgia.
Right.
And that they've said like, hey, this is that thing you like, this is that other thing you like. We're just going to put them all together until, you choke on it. And
Right.
and like they make a big deal out of, like the Back to the Future DeLorean and like retro video games. And then like I'm looking around my apartment and it's like, well, there's my Matchbox car of the DeLorean. There's my Lego figure of the arcade player. There's my Atari 2600. And then I'm like, okay, so my entire identity is a lie. That's great. Like, there's a point where it's like,
Oof.
you don't know like what part of it is you and what part of it is this culture that you just sort of been sold and then internalized, and it's supplanted whatever personality you're supposed to originally have. So like the difficulty that I have from this is that a lot of fandom, in a way, is surrendering of one's own agency in the service of whatever this thing is that you are a fan of. You no longer become an individual in your own right. You become a supporter of that thing. So,
Right.
because then it's the thing itself that becomes important. But I think that is harmful to the individual's identity. And you can spend like a lot of time and effort in becoming familiar with the thing that you were a fan of. And I know in particular like I watch a lot of B movies, and I know there are people who have like encyclopedic knowledge of various genres of film and this and that. But I mean, is it better to develop an encyclopedic understanding of like other people's creative work, or to make your own creative work, or to develop a deeper understanding of that creative work?
Right.
Because a lot of it seems, and I know I'm kind of starting to go a little far afield, but the thing that I find distressing about fandom is that it isn't about the depth of understanding, but rather it's a shallow
Collecting kind of.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
collecting factoids and toys and missing the point. Like, if we can bring it back to Ready Player One, the movie, the moment early on where I just felt my stomach drop with this sense of dread was early on, and they're playing this video game, and the way it works is when an enemy or an NPC is defeated, it sort of explodes in a shower of gold digital coins. And very briefly, it flashed upon an image of Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, who explode into a pile of gold coins. And I'm actually a really big fan of 80s horror. I absolutely love the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And there's, I know it's not like Citizen Kane, but Wes Craven was actually saying something when he was making those movies. They're about something. They're very political. They're really thoughtful. And this just kind of turned it into a pair of images, just a pair of kind of meaningless icons to collect.
Yeah.
Which then exploded into money. And I'm like, this is kind of a symbol of how this treats the 80s. It takes a lot of stuff that might be dated or might be kind of cheesy, but it was made with sincerity and it was made with a lot of love, and just turns it into this surface level object to collect, to make coins pour out. And I'm like, wow, that is a metaphor for Ready Player One right there. Just
it got a little
really,
too real
really
there.
Bothered me.
Yeah, and that is the thing that I feel like a lot of times separates high and low art, is that intentionality behind what's being made. Like, that is the problem that I had with a lot of like 2000s horrors, that it didn't seem to have any sort of message behind it. It didn't have any sort of notion or idea. Because I see what you're saying about Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, in that there are ideas behind what you're seeing. It isn't just this recognizable thing. But in Ready Player One, to reduce Freddy and Jason down to these iconic things and being like, hey, here's that thing that you recognize, stripped of all content, and then just reduced down to their money-making ability. It's like, I can't help but think you might have missed the point there.
Yeah, I mean, the worst example of it in that movie is the use of the Iron Giant as a battle mech, which is fucking obscene. If you've seen the movie, I mean, the movie is about free will and pacifism and choosing not to be a mindless weapon of death. And by expressing love, they've turned it into a mindless instrument of death. Like, you son of a bitch, how dare you? I was really offended, genuinely.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I know you were sad that your mom died, but hey, I dug her up. Like, I think you might have missed the point. Yeah. So, like, yeah, now you can hang out together.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, God.
Yeah, so it's missing the forest for the trees, to cut a long story short, and to mix metaphors.
Right.
Yeah, in the way that it becomes just sort of this mass of signifiers in search of a meaning. I mean, that's the sort of thing that I've been making a lot of hay of lately, is the idea of the simulacrum. Simulacrum not necessarily being a simulation of a thing, but it is a particular kind of simulation. It is a simulation lacking an original. It is a copy of a thing that no longer exists. So philosophically, in the world of Ready Player One, it is all simulacra. It is It is these like dead ghosts of meaningful culture parading around as icons. It is an icon of a thing that no longer serves any has any cultural weight other than being recognizable. Once you're aware of that, you look around for it more, and you start to see it in more places. My favorite example of a simulacrum is the save icon in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
It's a little diskette, which is to represent saving onto a diskette, which is not even a thing anymore.
Right. Or the phone receiver icon on cell phones.
Yeah.
Like
even better.
Hanging up, calling. I mean, we're not using those.
And
it's a simulacrum on the thing that destroyed it.
Right, yeah. So in that way, Ready Player One is kind of the thing that came along and killed the things that it most loved, or professed to love, I guess.
Yeah, in a horrifying way. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So just mainlining all those podcast episodes together, the guys did a brilliant takedown of this book and this movie, to the point where it does kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. And, at least made me wonder, as a fan of so many other things, that it's like, why am I a fan of these things? Am I a fan only of them because they're recognizable, or because they're ubiquitous? Or is it like the last throes of the monoculture, trying to maintain a direction for culture? Because if there's no one at the wheel, I mean, it could spin off in 1,000 different directions, and then we never know which way society is going to go culturally. But if there are forces at play that can say, we're going to continue to milk Star Wars for another 40 years, then our grandchildren are going to be talking about, Luke Skywalker still.
Right.
So, yeah, and it comes down to issues. I mean, I know I sound like, see, I don't even know I'm doing it. I know I sound like the Matrix. Hey, you kids remember that, but it's like, it does come down to an issue of control. Is it the individual who's going to decide how they express themselves culturally, or is it going to be, we have a very efficient and regimented system to keep everyone in line, and sure, it looks a lot like the real world, but isn't. So it's you can fall down the rabbit hole pretty far, like that metaphor they use in the Matrix.
I think my favorite metaphor in that movie was, buckle up, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
That's
good writing, man. It's good. It's really good.
It's Joey Pants, yeah. So the thing that I find troubling about a lot of fandom is the sublimation of the self in service of whether it is becoming a sort of an encyclopedic repository of factoids, or whether it is pretty much reorienting your life around this thing of which you are a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could talk in particularly about like collecting, like, because action figures and collectibles and Comic-Con exclusives and all that, like that is, a way that the impulse of collecting for whatever reason, whether it is just, having a totem of things that are culturally or spiritually significant to you or whatever, has been, exploited and gamified to the point where one is sort of led down the path of collecting things which are maybe of sentimental value, but of no actual value beyond their ability to separate you from your money.
Yeah.
So,
AKA amiibos.
Yeah, amiibos. Yeah, like those Funko Pops. Like those to me are like collecting cancer.
Yeah.
Like there's just like, if you look at them, just to look at them, they are a toy with like no articulation, a very restrictive design aesthetic. They come in a square, perfectly stackable box. They're, numbered, so you can be sure that you haven't missed one of them if you want to count from 1 to 800 or however many of them they've made. They are not toys to be meant to be played with. They are, they are strictly meant to be collected and stacked. They are the end result of what collecting is supposed to be. There's this ruthless, soulless end game of collecting. So, yeah.
Right.
So I apologize to the listeners who like Funko Pops, but you're being taken advantage of. Right.
And there's just something about how they all have the same weird black void eyes. I'm reminded of that quote from Jaws, where it's like, a doll's eyes.
Yeah, you've seen a shark? He's got black eyes like a Funko Pop's eyes. They update that, and that's that is horrifying. But yeah, I mean, they all fit within this particularly prescribed aesthetic, where the range of how one can express, there's such a rich variety of characters and art styles and design, but then to reduce them down into, hey, can you make this into a little tiny body with a big, marshmallow shaped head and giant eyes? Yeah, boss, I can do that. But it's just a bummer. Yeah, it completely strips away anything that made this thing unique and reduces it to this iconic commodity.
Right.
So
it's kind of bleak.
Yeah, so it really bugs me. And then to just see mountains of them at conventions, because
and people paying a lot of money for them too. Man.
Yeah, and that
they gotta do that.
They push those buttons for collectors, so it's just, I don't know.
I mean, say what you will about Warhammer people, at least they paint their figurines. There's a personal touch to it. There's a certain degree of creativity in there. This is a thing you bought, but you're actually painting it. You're taking time on it, and you're putting something of yourself into it.
Yeah, and then that it does actually have a use beyond being a collectible.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, say what you will about how eye-wateringly expensive Warhammer figures are. It's at least you have a use for them, rather than just being hey, got that Funko Pop.
Yep. There it is. It's there. It's sitting there.
That's
I don't know.
What does it do? Whatever it does, it's doing it.
It looks at me with its soulless eyes.
Soulless,
its shark's eyes. Like a doll's eyes.
Yeah.
It judges me on the shelf. It looks at me with that weird Funko Pop glare and says, "You spent your money on this."
Yeah, and I mean, didn't we already go through Beanie Babies once?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
those were fun.
Yeah, so again, to invoke the Matrix, it's we've destroyed Zion before, and we're getting really good at it, so Funko Pops are the second Beanie Baby wave. Until, maybe it'll just be digital goods. Maybe it'll just be something that you pay money for that you don't even own. It's intangible.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're buying a party hat for Second Life or something.
Oh, God.
So
yeah, I can absolutely see that going that way. That's upsetting.
Yeah. So
anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I'm coming at it from a different point of view. I haven't really been involved in intense fandom so much. I'm coming from it as on the opposite end. I write in genres that are known for having very intense fandom. So I write in sci-fi, some fantasy, some horror. I write some in genre fiction. And genre fiction is associated with a lot of fandom. And a lot of genre writers come up through fandom, and they start their careers by being part of fandom, either writing about fandom or like going to cons, or like starting by writing fan fiction and then writing their own fiction. And they sort of start by being a part of this fandom community. But I didn't. I've never really been in that stuff. And as a result, some kind of angry nerds have complained that, like, I'm a fake geek, so I don't deserve to be a published genre writer, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that works.
Yeah. So it's all a little mystifying to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm trying to network, and I'm surrounded by middle-aged people who define themselves according to their Hogwarts house or name their kids Anakin. And I'm not really that.
Like, why don't you just name him Damien while you're at it?
Yeah. I'd rather kind of focus on making my own work than in obsessing over someone else's. And I mean, I enjoy other people's work, obviously, but I feel like you want to take some of that and synthesize it and learn from it and make your own. But I'll occasionally worry if my focus on writing and my lack of interest in being in fandom could mean a career setback for me.
Huh.
You know, because it's like I'm not part of that. Also, there's another side of it, too, to being a writer, which is the thought of having fans kind of scares me a little bit.
Huh.
Like, I keep picturing Kathy Bates in Misery trying to break my legs when I kill off a character that they like, you know? Like, so there's something about that makes me extremely nervous, to the point where, like, when people... I do have fans because I'm published, and my fans so far are lovely and normal. But there's this part of me that's so nervous of it, because it's like, oh God, if a community like that springs up around your work, like, are you responsible for this?
Yeah.
No.
At what point does kind of the tail start wagging the dog? And the political end of it is a sidebar, but yeah, it's like how Trump kind of took over the Republican Party, and it's like, well, this is the way the wind blows now. Like, it's this beast that we curated and fed, and then it kind of escaped its cage, and is no longer under control of its handlers. It's
Right.
I think people have described it as akin to like riding the tiger, which is like, yeah. It works as long as you can hold on, but once you let go, like, you're done for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's tricky then. At what point do you let your fans dictate your own creative work?
Right.
And is that fandom is like what kind of weird toxic relationship is that, where it's sort of like, are you kept hostage by your fans then? If you're saying,
Right.
like, we're gonna act out, like, look what you made me do for writing work that displeased me. I didn't.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know
or
where that's
even
gonna
if
go.
they still like your work, what if, I don't know, a critic writes something negative about your work and they, like, flip their shit and start sending them, like, horrific
Yeah.
emails and messages and stuff? Like, are you responsible for that? Do you have to, like, intervene over and over again and be like, you guys, stop it, you're embarrassing me? You know?
Yeah, it's like, this is why we can't have nice things.
What do you do? It's this really weird thing. And I'm like, I'm barely an adult. I can't be responsible for other people. I'm barely a functioning human being right now.
Yeah, don't make me responsible for other people's actions. Yikes.
Yeah, like, I don't dust enough. Like, I barely clean my apartment. I can't fucking keep other people sensible.
Yeah. Well,
so it's slightly terrifying.
yeah, and I mean, part of it is, because that does become a thorny issue, because you shouldn't be expected to have to police your fans. Like, they're, I hope, functional adults who can take responsibility for their own actions. But it does get into kind of this vague First Amendment issue about, like, what is the responsibility of the author to put that information out there in the first place?
Right.
Yeah, I personally am more, liberal in that view, and that people should be able to write what they want to write. Just because you said something that maybe, like, rubs someone the wrong way, it's like, well, it is within that person's ability to monitor their own actions. Like, you can put out a lot of different ideas that, you can only rely on the audience to treat them with the appropriate level of maturity.
Right.
Otherwise, then you get into this sort of self-censorship cycle where it's like, just like, where does it end? Like, I'm afraid to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
anything for fear of the repercussions.
Yeah, and it's tricky because, I mean, there's that, on the one hand, like, you're an artist and you don't want to be this obnoxious, like, elementary school teacher lecturing people all the time. But on the other hand, like, you are still a person. You're still, like, a member of society, and you probably have some sort of desire to not make the world shittier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure no artist sets out with the intention of being like, yeah, I'm really going to ruin someone's day today. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't really have an answer for it.
I don't either. I don't know.
Yeah, because
I think every creative kind of draws the line differently, or most creatives, if you're human, you're going to be horrified when somebody who's a fan of yours cites that as inspiration to do something awful. Like, I know Stephen King published a book years ago about a school shooting or something, and then some years after that, a school shooter who, carried out a shooting at his school cited that book as inspiration, and Stephen King ended up taking it off the market. And he's like, yeah, I know that guy was probably nuts, and I doubt it was because he read my book, but, like, I don't want this on me.
Yeah.
And, like, I can't blame him for that. I mean, it's easy to say, like, well, rationally, it's not Stephen King's fault, and that guy was bad, and you shouldn't censor yourself. But, I mean, I feel like if that was me, I probably would make that same decision, just because that would fuck me up, man.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it does ultimately fall to the artist to, like you say, decide where the line is, where it is them ultimately in control of their work. And if they say, what I said stands, then yeah, that's one way of doing it. Or you could say, I don't want this work being out in the public eye, and I'm going to take it away. And it's like, well, that works too. The flip side of that is, the saying about, once you release art into the world, like, it kind of no longer belongs to you. Like, you can't control how people are going to react to things, and then it becomes this back and forth process, which is, what we would otherwise call culture.
Right.
So yeah, in a way, like in the example of, Stephen King putting this book out there about a school shooting and a school shooting resulting from it, I mean, you can say that it isn't on him any more than it is on the shooter, because he put this particular work out there for whatever entertainment value. It's what he does, and the shooter responded to it in their own way. So that isn't something that King could have anticipated when writing it, and I'm sure it wasn't even his intention. It would be amazing to have that level of control over your audience,
Right.
but it just doesn't work that way. And to say that a book is the reason that that someone shot up a school, I think is giving the book way too much a disproportionate role in the events that transpired, more than the person who actually engaged in them. But then you get to things like the Bible. Yeah, I should probably cut that out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this hits on our next topic, which is toxic fandom.
Right.
Why is fandom so often toxic? And I used to think that it was because, these fandoms, they're full of those darn old, those white males. Those white males, which are so bad. But YA fandom and Steven Universe fandom are overwhelmingly female, and in the latter case, very queer friendly, and they're horrific. They're very, very upsetting. And also this is nothing new either. This isn't just a modern thing. It's easy again to blame it on the internet. But years and years and years ago, Harlan Ellison wrote about the horrors of genre fandom in an essay he called Xenogenesis. He mentions being at a con where one fan threw a cup of barf at Alan Dean Foster. Just threw some barf.
Like,
And
use your
Ellison
words,
mentioned
man.
he being chased into bathrooms by fans who wouldn't leave him alone. Like, he remembered walking into a bathroom and this fan would not stop at bugging him and asking him questions. And he's like, dude, please leave me alone. I gotta pee. And the guy just would not leave him alone. So he just he started peeing at a urinal and the guy would not leave him alone, which I understand is a very serious breach of etiquette in the men's room.
Yeah, you do not want to be spoken to
while he's having a wee.
Yeah.
So Harlan just sort of turned 90 degrees to his left and just peed on the dude's shoes. Like, it's just this bonkers situation to be in. So
that is a
why?
very Harlan Ellison reaction.
Why does this happen?
Yeah, because like if you're being talked to when you're at a urinal, then it's kind of like, here we are, just the three of us. Like, yeah, it is not a comfortable situation to be in.
It's not okay.
Yeah, like to your point about Steven Universe, which I'm not overly familiar with it because I don't watch kids cartoons.
No.
But yeah, like I hear plenty of stories where the show is standing in for like some major traumas going on in that viewer's life. And and like the state of mental health in this country, like not that toxic fandom is exclusive to the US because it clearly isn't. We can go to Korea for that.
Ooh.
Like that beside that being like a whole other topic, you can speculate that like society is becoming much more isolated with just this like simulation of social interaction. And the show is filling in that gap for something missing in the fan's life, but ultimately that is a stopgap solution. Like entertainment can be cathartic, but it's but it's not a solution. It's not a substitution for like therapy or actual social engagement. And the problem is that with a lot of Steven Universe fans, like it's filling in that gap where like mental health care should have filled in for this person.
Right.
And I think that part of what makes fandom so toxic is its conservatism. And I don't mean I mean that like outside of like any kind of political notion, but I mean that it creates a particular safe space, to use a charged phrase, where you really know what you're going to get in it. Like people don't like it when like there's a phrase in business that's like, who moved my cheese, and it deals with management, and the notion is that like if you're a rat in a maze and you know where the cheese is, and then you get to the end of the maze and you're like, well, where's my cheese? That is the idea that someone upset the order of things. And if you are going to fandom as a safe space from whatever maelstrom your life is, then to find things suddenly different can be really traumatic to the fan that goes to this fandom as a respite from whatever else is going on in their life. So to reiterate what I'm saying about calling it conservatives is that it is, yes, antagonistic to change. It's saying I like things in a particular way, and I just want them to be that way forever, basically. It's saying like things are fine just the way they are. Please don't ever change or it'll ruin me.
Right. And you do see that a lot. Like I think in response to The Last Jedi, it seems like fans got the maddest at parts where the film tried something new.
Yeah, because you have, especially if you're using fandom to supplant your own identity or shore it up or fill in the gaps where an authentic person would be, then to have things suddenly change somehow in that fandom is implicitly saying, well, something changes in you. All these things that you believe, all these values that you internalized, those are suddenly different now. And to say it isn't just the movie that changed or the story that changed, it is you that changed, against your will, no less. Because if a person ties so much of their identity to the thing that they're a fan of, then to have that thing change, it's suddenly, it can upset their worldview, in my estimation.
Right, or not even to change, but just to defy their expectations.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, this pairing didn't end up together. Like, there's still so many people who are, like, pushing 40 years old who are mad that, like, Harry Potter ended up with whoever it was he ended up with in the books. And they're still mad, or just, this pairing didn't hook up, that pairing didn't hook up, and it gets to the point where fans will, like, send angry letters to creatives or actors or something just because they didn't see the pairing that they wanted.
Yeah.
And it's worrying.
Right. Yeah, and that is manifold issue because one of the things that I think about in story writing, and a lot of the time, like, I'm trying to be original, I'm trying to do something new, I'm trying to be novel and provide something unexpected. But if you apply that to a different medium, like say music, no one ever got mad at a song for hitting all the notes they wanted it to hit. So in a way, and this is something to kind of mitigate anxiety about writing, was just like, if things go exactly the way you want them to, or exactly the way you expect them to, that can be really rewarding. It's, I don't know, for whatever reason, like the flip side is, if you aren't prepared to have your expectations subverted in a meaningful way, then that can be a real problem, because you're like, I just want the punchline to land the way I think all punchlines are supposed to land.
Right.
But just to shoehorn in a point about one of the movies that I love is No Country for Old Men. Like, that movie is great. It's based on a book. It's great about subverting expectations, because you have this whole notion about the hero is going to fight the villain and he's going to be victorious or not, depending on which way we want to go. But we are headed to an ultimate conclusion, are we not? And the movie says no.
Nope.
Sometimes life doesn't work out that way. And like, that's like the gut punch that the movie delivers to you. Just the notion that it's like, no, like, sometimes life just doesn't go the way you plan it to. And just like that idea was really in the DNA of the story, I found really rewarding. But if you aren't prepared for that, you're going to be like, well, what the hell is this? And I think that it can be handled really badly, like in like Star Wars movies, or like the
Game of Thrones ending, maybe.
Yeah, Game of Thrones ending is a great example of it. I think that because for all the other problems about Star Wars Episode 8, the thing that I walked away with from that movie is I didn't know how I was supposed to feel about it. It's like, what is the lesson I'm supposed to internalize from the story? Because stories are fables that we use to explain and understand our lives, like I would think. So then Star Wars, it's saying, sometimes do something and believe in yourself except for when you're wrong, and maybe someone you don't trust is someone you can, and something about love. And then like just the message just gets completely muddied by the end of it, to the point where you're just like, what am I supposed to feel? Like, how am I supposed to feel about this movie? So I don't know, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's just the problems I have with my mother. but yeah, like I definitely get what you're saying about Star Wars is supposed to fit a particular mold, and episode 7 and 8, you're like, what is the mold here that we're fitting? And yeah, I mean, I guess like I kind of fall more on the like confused fan side of things, because I'm like, as a consumer of entertainment, I'm like, I don't know what this is supposed to be doing. Like, how does this work? Like, what am I supposed to be getting out of it? And I think that was
I kind of felt like it's not so much about the world, but it is about the rest of the Star Wars myth, and it's just kind of taking the original trilogy and sort of breaking it apart and looking at it with sort of a more sad eye of like, here was hope, but this isn't hope anymore. We're kind of, this is the come down. Like, what I thought of Benicio del Toro's character in it is, he's Han Solo, only here's who Han Solo would really be. Like, here's who a smuggler would really be. Actually, he'd be a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Like, he probably won't turn out to have a heart of gold. He's going to be truly self-serving. He's going to do what benefits him, even if that is siding with the space Nazis, and he's going to turn out to be an unreliable piece of shit. Like, that's kind of how I saw that movie going, as like a response to previous Star Wars, with a little bit more of like a more grumpy eye.
Yeah.
So to that end, I actually kind of liked it. I kind of liked that side of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that this episode is dedicated to just repudiating fandom, but I mean, the one that I do like more than any of the prequels or sequels is Rogue One. I think I would trade all 3 prequels for Rogue One happily.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. Just because, and I know that, we're kind of getting beside the point here, but it's like, I think that it's a movie that has, heart, and you can really tell what the stakes are in it, and it supports the existing narrative of the original trilogy. And yeah, so I like that, but yeah, hey, that's fandom, right? You just can't get away from it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll prepare for a lot of people yelling at you for liking Rogue One, I guess. I don't know.
It's weird. Like, it seems to have already been forgotten. I don't know, because like you see like the 3 like variant covers of Entertainment Weekly or something, where it's like, oh, here are all the memorable characters from the prequels, and it's like, I don't remember half of these assholes. And and then the ones of the original trilogy, and you're like, yeah, okay, I get you. And then the sequel trilogy.
I did like Rogue One for having the balls to kill everyone. I respect that.
That's what really got me on board with it, because it suddenly lent this it lent this realism and gravity to the events of the original Star Wars, because they're these people that are they don't quite come together. They have their problems, but they see their mission through to the end. They really go the distance, and they fucking die for it. And so all of a sudden, you have this hour and a half of those characters that you spent time with, so that what the stakes are going into Star Wars. You're like, yeah, they're these people who had lives and histories, and they were part of a bold, doomed mission to set in motion the events of A New Hope. So yeah, that it really resonates with me.
Yeah, I just kind of respect filmmakers, especially when they're making something that's perceived as a kid's movie or family movie, for killing major characters.
Yeah.
Because it's like the thing that fans get really mad about. So I just kind of love it when they do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I kind of love and respect it so much. Like, looking back, I kind of love the people who made, even though it was a shitty cash grab movie, the 1980s animated Transformers movie, for having the balls to kill the hero in front of children.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. I'm just picturing some really grumpy writers who, like, went to Hollywood with big dreams and ended up working on this, going like, you know what, kids, we're going to fucking kill Optimus Prime. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Welcome to the real world, children. Go to hell. Life is pain. Like, I respect that so much.
Well,
that's amazing.
Well, if I can, I don't disagree, but if I can mitigate or undercut that, they did have a new toy line to push, so.
Yeah, but there were softer ways to do that. Be like, I have to go to an adventure in another dimension.
Yeah, my home planet needs me.
You could have done that. They're like, no, you know what? We're going to fucking kill them.
Yeah,
we're going to kill everybody. Yeah. Everybody dies.
you're going to watch...
dick, children.
You're going to watch, Ratchet get shot in the face. Like, so you wake up, kids.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's going to be, just ground into powder by Unicron, and you're going to have to watch every frame of it.
Yeah, he dies screaming.
Yeah.
Your beloved character gets swallowed by a demon.
Yeah, welcome to your teenage years, kids. It's only going to go downhill from here.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, and, killing characters, is a bold thing, and that's what I really responded to about Rogue One. And it does get into... I was flipping through the some of the Channel 101 pages, and before anyone knew who Dan Harmon was, he was associated with that, and he has his, as I'm sure your savvy listeners know, he has this circular method for writing stories, which is the character going through a journey and coming back to the place where they started, ultimately changed.
Right.
He uses that method in one case for writing features, but he says that it's basically the opposite when writing for TV, in the character coming back to the original place and realizing the futility of change. So, yeah, and it's Dan Harmon, so of course it's this unabashedly cynical take on the notion of story or entertainment. Yeah, but the long and short of it is that it is a story in service of the status quo. which if you're Dan Harmon and been writing for TV for sort of time immemorial, then you understand, you've peeked behind the curtain,
Right.
what the formula is. But if you're just a viewer, if you're just the tail being wagged, then
Right.
you experience these stories not realizing, like, holy shit, I've been watching the same group of friends for 7 years. And events come and go, but the status quo never changes. And
Right.
and that is, I feel, ultimately it stunts growth of the personal development in the viewer. The viewer themselves becomes sort of regressive, because like they are not changing. They aren't allowed to grow because the characters that they're basing their identity or their values on are designed not to grow, purely out of the capitalistic need to save money on sets by having everything take place in the same 3 locations.
Right.
Yeah, and again, this is more Dan Harmon's cynicism soaking through.
Right, and The Simpsons sort of pokes fun at that too. In a lot of the episodes, they'll mention, like, how are we going to get over the fact that Dad and Flanders are friends? Like, next week they won't be friends anymore. I don't know. It's just going to change for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I'll just hit the reset button. Yeah, and it's like, when The Simpsons started, Homer was my dad's age, and now I'm older than Homer. And
God.
It's like, how does that work?
Right. Right. They were teenagers in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. Marge went to college in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah.
Now.
And that gets back to the biggest cultural influence that we've been already spending plenty of time on, Star Wars. Like, I liked Star Wars when I was a literal child,
Yeah.
but am I supposed to still like Star Wars now at my age?
Right.
Like, and if that is the case, does that show that I have not developed past, what those stories meant? Are they timeless stories, or am I merely not moving past them?
Right.
So that's a, if you want to lie awake at night, just, mull that over in your mind for a while.
Yeah. So, I guess that kind of segs into our next topic, which
Yeah.
is, so there's something socially, spiritually, or emotionally harmful about being too involved in fandom, even if you're not one of those creepy reactionary fans. Like, there are people who quote He-Man in their wedding vows. Offbeat Bride is a terrifying place. And I've gotten into arguments with other folks in the genre writing community about the MCU, and something that I've found is that MCU fans try to defend Marvel movies' sort of over-the-top storylines by comparing them to the Greek myths or to Cecil B. DeMille's biblical epics, but those were about the gods,
Mm-hmm.
And there's something kind of fucked up to me about comparing Spider-Man to the gods. Like, have you accepted Spider-Man as your Lord and Savior? Are you going to make a burnt offering to Spider-Man?
Yeah, or like, bear the mark of the beast with your, Avengers tattoo on your ankle.
Yeah, like, there's something about that comparison that's a little weird. Like, and I'm not kidding about people who sort of quote geek stuff in their weddings. Like, I'm not a religious person, but to me there's something a little bit disturbing about taking out the sacred and replacing it with this kind of corporate entertainment product.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, like, I mean, I certainly agree with you on the aspect of people finding culture or spirituality in something that is ultimately just like you say, a corporate product, because it isn't something that is designed to necessarily benefit people spiritually or culturally. It is something that is designed to be profitable, and if people happen to respond to it, then that's a great side effect. On the flip side, like, since becoming a really insufferable atheist in college, as I think most people do,
Yeah.
I started to see religion and fandom as fairly interchangeable, in that one is a collection of short stories that imparts a particular point of view, and it happens to be from 4,000 or so years ago. And another one is a sci-fi show that presents a moral quandary of that week, and the characters who represent particular archetypes are there to sort it out. This is more in a in my personal repudiation of religion and elevation of fiction, in that I think that, when done for the right reasons, there is a lot of validity in that, because, it does elevate the position of a writer as, as a creator of culture. Like, you are there to say, these are the particular issues that we're dealing with. These are the factors that come into play. And given all these different ideas that are in flux, if you were this individual and you were in this situation, how would you react? And the story is just saying, this is how, I think a particular character would react. And this, I think, is the result of that, this result / fallout of whatever their decision is. And I've seen that in like a lot of good TV, and I've seen that in a lot of bad TV. Bad TV, I think, is that which reinforces the status quo, like the idea that you aren't changed by the end of what you've seen. Like, when you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, okay, I was right all along. That's good. It's good being right all the time. Like, good entertainment, even if it is still entertainment, is a good opportunity for self-reflection. The difficulty is when fans expect entertainment to do the heavy lifting of spirituality, when in reality it's a writer's room trying to keep their jobs as long as they can, and if you gain anything spiritual from it, and it's an unintended side effect, it's a nice to have, it's all gravy, but really it's just people saying, how do we continue to keep people engaged in our show? How do we keep people watching? And spirituality and culture are not designed as the end goal. They are nice to have, but the importance is to get more and more people invested in watching your show or going to your movie or buying your toys, because that is the business of entertainment. So, and the difficulty then too is, like, if you write something that does become more challenging or more rarefied, it hurts your bottom line, and you get less content of that because it isn't as profitable and people don't want to make it. So those two sides of entertainment are at odds, and that entertainment, I feel, can be particularly rewarding and spiritually gratifying, but that's not what it was designed to do. So that's a question for the reader. How would you solve this problem?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Which 1980s Hasbro cartoon are you gonna quote in your vows?
Yeah. Which I think there's something that was like which My Little Pony character. Yeah. It was at Comic-Con, and some actual psychologists did a cross-generational study of cartoon characters, like what were the most like recognizable or familiar cartoon characters. And it was surprising in that, like, old Hanna-Barbera cartoons scored highly, which I do not see as being culturally relevant whatsoever, but it's something about, like, the Flintstones is still ubiquitous. Yeah. And other things too, where it was like it was pretty much saying, like, hey, what are the cartoons that you like? What are the cartoons you remember? And unsurprisingly to me, Looney Tunes rated really high.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, because I think that they have really cemented themselves as, when you think of cartoons, you think Looney Tunes. But yeah, there were Flintstones in there, and then there are other things like the 80s cartoons, like you mentioned. But when they're going over a list of, what are the memorable characters, or what are the ones that you remember, there was no differentiation amongst all the different supposed archetypes from, like, My Little Pony or Care Bears or He-Man or G.I. Joe. They were all functionally interchangeable in the study, which gets back to your thing about which Hogwarts house am I sorted into. The thing is, like, ultimately that doesn't matter. That you are a Harry Potter fan is your commonality. So yeah, it was a really interesting result out of this psychology survey that they had put forward about cartoons. I forget what it was called. It was last year, so just check the program if you got one. Yeah, so yeah, the notion that there are different characters that say something different about who you are is like technically insignificant. It's more over the kind of show that you like that is more indicative of what your interests or your values are. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
Well, that's neat.
So, yeah, I learned a lot of valuable stuff at Comic-Con, and I got some very valuable collectors out of it. Valuable and, sarcastic air quotes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some rare Funko Pops.
Yeah. Funnily enough, and this completely undermines any authenticity I have, is I got autographed Barb Lego minifigures from Stranger Things. Now,
oh my God.
Yeah. Now, if you want to talk about the regressive nature of fandom, we can just dive right into Stranger Things. Yeah, it is very much a pastiche of a certain style, and I mean, I love the first season because it was something new. I'm like, oh, this is different and interesting, but also familiar, because ultimately you don't want anything too different. You want something that is different-ish. But then when I got into watching the second season, and there was a particular shot that was just taken right out of E.T., and the lizard brain of me watching it was like, oh, neat, it's that thing just like E.T. Then it's like, hang on, you've already seen E.T. What does this bring to the table? And it becoming this pastiche of established tropes, then, I mean, for me, I kind of start to wonder, I'm like, am I being entertained or am I being pandered to?
Right.
What exactly is it that I'm getting out of Stranger Things other than a recognition of things I'm already familiar with? And if that's all I'm getting out of it, well, what's the point?
Right. I mean, E.T. still exists.
Yeah.
You could go watch that.
Yeah, is it just like me, some regressive desire to, return to the womb? I want to be 6 again or something?
Yeah.
So, I feel like Stranger Things will advance when it stands on its own 2 feet of the strength of what novel notions it brings, and what characters it brings, and what narrative elements and stylistic elements it has. But the double-edged sword of that is that isn't Stranger Things' strengths.
Not at all.
Yeah, it is designed to be an 80s throwback pastiche, and if it moves away from that, it alienates the people who got into the show because that's what it was.
Right.
But if all you're doing is chasing culture that already exists and is finite, you're going to run out of stuff to reference.
Right, and it starts getting kind of desperate. With season 3, they're going remember New Coke?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That happened?
Yeah, and at which point it's are we watching Stranger Things or Family Guy?
Yeah.
It's just, comedy by recognition.
J.C. Penney?
Yeah. Hey.
Remember that?
Remember those characters from Who's the Boss? You're just yes, I do. I watched that show. Cool. We're on the same wavelength. That's great.
Yeah.
But, yeah, other than that, what does it bring?
That's all for part 1 of our discussion on fandom. Be sure to join us next time in part 2, when we talk about parasocial relationships. If you like what you heard, head on over to patreon.com/writegood, that's RITEGUD, and subscribe. Subscribers get exclusive bonus content and access to the Kitty Sneezes Discord, where you can request episode topics. Once we reach 20 subscribers, we will open up the Lament configuration for a special bonus episode on Clive Barker's The Hellbound Heart, the horror novella that spawned the iconic Hellraiser franchise. So join. We have such sights to show you. But until then, keep writing good.
This has been Write Good with R.S. Benedict, hosted by R.S. Benedict and produced by Matt Keeley for KS Media LLC. This has been a Kitty Sneezes production. For comments and concerns, please write to us at writegood@kittysneezes.com. That's RITEGUD @kittysneezes.com. If you'd like to support us, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/writegood.
kittysneezes.com in color.